Natalie Brooks smoothed her emerald dress for the third time, trying to convince herself she could do this. The Meridian Gallery glowed with soft lighting, expensive wine, and the kind of people who measured success in square footage and stock portfolios. Somewhere in this crowd, her ex-fiancé Kyle was celebrating his engagement to Jessica, Natalie's former college roommate. Coming here was a mistake. She'd known it the moment the invitation arrived, with its elegant script and subtle undertone of, "Look how much better off we are without you." But pride was a powerful motivator, and Natalie had been determined to prove she'd moved on. She hadn't. The gallery showcased contemporary art, bold splashes of color on canvas that probably cost more than her annual salary as an art teacher. Natalie wandered through the space, nodding at acquaintances and avoiding eye contact with anyone who might want to discuss her situation. That's when she heard Kyle's voice, amplified by a microphone. "If I could have everyone's attention, please." Natalie's stomach dropped. The toast. She'd forgotten about the engagement toast. Kyle stood on a raised platform near the gallery center, looking polished and successful in his designer suit. Jessica beside him wore a stunning white cocktail dress and a diamond that could probably fund Natalie's classroom supplies for a decade. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," Kyle continued, his arm around Jessica's waist. "Especially those who've supported us through our journey together." Natalie needed to escape. Now. Before Kyle's eyes found her in the crowd, before she had to watch him gaze adoringly at Jessica the way he once looked at her. She spotted a velvet curtain partially concealing an alcove near the back of the gallery. Without thinking, she slipped behind it, pressing herself against the cool wall and trying to steady her breathing. "This is pathetic," she whispered to herself. "You're a grown woman hiding behind a curtain." "Could be worse," a male voice said from the darkness beside her. "You could be the guy who's been hiding here for the past 20 minutes. Natalie jumped, her hand flying to her chest. In the shadows of the alcove, she could make out the silhouette of a man leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't realize anyone was here. I'll just." "Running from the happy couple too?" he asked, his tone sympathetic rather than judgmental. "Something like that." Natalie's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she could see him better now. Tall, with dark hair and a strong jawline, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. "You?" "Moral support for a friend who's displaying his artwork." "I fulfilled my obligation, made appropriate impressed noises, and decided I'd earned a break from small talk." He stepped closer, and Natalie caught the subtle scent of cedar and citrus. "I'm Julian." "Natalie." "Well, Natalie, I have to ask, is hiding behind this curtain really your best option? Because from my extensive experience," he gestured around the alcove, "the acoustics are terrible, and you can still hear everything happening out there." As if to prove his point, Kyle's voice rang out again. Jessica knew from our first date that she was the one. Her ambition, her drive, her understanding of what it takes to build a real future. Natalie closed her eyes. The implication was clear. She had lacked all those things. "Sounds like a real charmer," Julian observed quietly. "My ex-fiancé," Natalie admitted. "Marrying my ex-roommate. I thought I could handle seeing them together, but apparently, I overestimated my emotional maturity." "Natalie?" Kyle's voice, closer now, not amplified by microphone. "Is that you back there?" Panic flooded through her. Of course he'd spotted her. Of course he'd come to gloat, to ensure she witnessed his happiness. Julian must have read the fear on her face because he moved with sudden purpose. "Trust me for 30 seconds, he murmured, then raised his voice. "There you are, darling. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost." Before Natalie could process what was happening, Julian stepped out from behind the curtain, gently pulling her with him. Kyle stood a few feet away, champagne glass in hand, his expression shifting from curious to surprised. "Kyle," Natalie managed, trying to sound casual. "I didn't realize you were bringing someone," Kyle said, his gaze assessing Julian with barely concealed competitiveness. Julian Hawthorne, Julian said smoothly, extending his hand. I've heard quite a bit about you. Something flickered in Kyle's eyes, recognition, maybe, or calculation. They shook hands, and Natalie noticed Kyle's grip was just slightly too firm, too aggressive. Well, Kyle said, turning his attention back to Natalie. It's good to see you've moved on. I was worried after everything. Julian's arm slid around Natalie's waist, warm and solid. After everything, she's doing remarkably. Then, before Natalie could react, Julian leaned down and kissed her. The kiss was brief but unmistakable, his lips warm and surprisingly gentle against hers. When he pulled back, Natalie stood speechless, her mind struggling to catch up with reality. Kyle's expression had shifted from smug to uncertain. Right. Well. Congratulations. Jessica is probably looking for me. He retreated, and Natalie finally found her voice. What just happened? Julian's smile was equal parts apologetic and mischievous. I saved you from an awkward confrontation. You're welcome. You kissed me. I did. Twice, actually, once behind the curtain when I first decided to help. You were so panicked you didn't notice. His eyes sparkled with humor. Was that okay? I figured selling the boyfriend angle required some authenticity. Despite everything, Natalie found herself laughing. You're insane. Possibly. But your ex looked satisfyingly rattled, so I'd call it a success. Julian offered his arm. Now, would you like to continue this charade for the rest of the evening, or would you prefer I disappear back behind the curtain? Natalie looked at this stranger who just kissed her to save her pride, and made a split-second decision. Stay, she said, taking his arm. At least until Kyle stops watching us. Deal. Though fair warning, I'm a terrible dancer, so if they start the music, you're on your own. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of champagne, polite conversation, and Julian's surprisingly convincing performance as Natalie's devoted boyfriend. He had a natural charm that put people at ease, answering questions about their relationship, with just enough detail to be believable without being excessive. We met at a coffee shop, he told one of Natalie's former colleagues. She was sketching in a notebook, completely absorbed. I asked what she was drawing, and she told me to mind my own business. Natalie played along, adding, he was very persistent. Bought me 3 coffees before I finally agreed to tell him my name. Worth every overpriced latte, Julian said, squeezing her hand gently. The easy way they fell into rhythm surprised her. Julian seemed to anticipate her discomfort before she felt it, steering conversations away from awkward topics and toward safer ground. When someone asked about wedding plans, he smoothly redirected to discussing the artwork on display. Kyle and Jessica kept their distance for most of the evening, though Natalie caught Kyle watching them several times with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't the smug satisfaction she'd expected. If anything, he looked unsettled. Your ex keeps staring, Julian murmured during a lull in conversation. Should I kiss you again to really drive the point home? I think you've done enough damage to his ego for one night, Natalie replied, though she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach at the suggestion. Pity. I was just getting warmed up. His smile was teasing, but there was something else in his eyes, genuine interest that had nothing to do with their charade. As the evening wore on, they found themselves on the gallery's terrace, escaping the crowd for a moment of quiet. The city lights sparkled below them, and a cool breeze carried the scent of jasmine from nearby planters. Thank you, Natalie said quietly. For tonight. For saving me from complete humiliation. Julian leaned against the railing, studying her. Can I ask you something? Why did you come tonight if seeing them together was this painful? Natalie considered the question. Pride, mostly. I wanted to prove I was fine, that they hadn't broken me. Kyle told me when we broke up that I lacked ambition, that I was too focused on meaningless things like art and helping kids instead of building a real career. She wrapped her arms around herself. I wanted to show him I'd built something without him. And have you? I teach art at an underfunded middle school. I run an after-school program for at-risk kids. I live in a one-bedroom apartment and drive a car that's older than some of my students. She laughed without humor. Not exactly the success story that would impress Kyle. But it matters to you, Julian said. It wasn't a question. It's everything to me. Those kids, some of them have such hard lives, and for a few hours a week, they get to create something beautiful. They get to express themselves safely. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. Kyle never understood that. He thought I was wasting my potential. Julian reached out, gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Kyle's an idiot. What you do matters more than whatever corporate ladder he's climbing. The sincerity in his voice made something crack open in Natalie's chest. You don't even know me. I know you hid behind a curtain rather than make a scene at your ex's engagement party. I know you light up when you talk about your students. I know you're brave enough to show up here tonight even though it terrified you. Before Natalie could respond, music drifted out from the gallery, a slow, romantic melody that made couples drift toward the terrace's dance area. Oh no, Julian said with mock horror. I warned you about my dancing. Come on, it can't be that bad. Natalie held out her hand. You've been such a convincing boyfriend all evening. Might as well complete the performance. He took her hand with exaggerated reluctance, pulling her close. Don't say I didn't warn you. But as they began to move, Natalie discovered he'd been lying. Julian was an excellent dancer, leading her with confident ease across the terrace. His hand was warm on her lower back, and being this close to him made her acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. You're a terrible liar, she said, looking up at him. You dance beautifully. Boarding school requirement. Ballroom dancing, etiquette, the whole insufferable package. His expression grew more serious. Natalie, I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. I'm only in town for a few more weeks. Business project that's wrapping up. After tonight, I'll probably head back to Seattle. He paused. But I'd like to see you again before I leave. No pretense, no fake boyfriend act. Just dinner, conversation, getting to know each other honestly. Natalie's heart raced. Why? Because hiding behind that curtain with you was the most genuine interaction I've had in months. Because you're interesting and kind and you make me want to know more. He smiled. Because that kiss wasn't entirely for show, and I'd like to try it again without your ex-fiancé as an audience. She should say no. Should protect herself from getting attached to someone who was leaving soon. But looking into Julian's eyes, seeing the honest interest there, she found herself nodding. Dinner sounds good. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, she agreed. The song ended, but they stayed on the dance floor, swaying gently as another melody began. Across the terrace, Natalie caught sight of Kyle watching them, his expression unreadable. For once, she didn't care what he thought. I should probably make an actual exit soon, Julian said. Give you a proper goodbye that will make your ex wonder what he's missing. Always thinking strategically. It's a gift. He spun her gently, then pulled her back close. Last chance to back out of tomorrow. Not backing out. Good. Julian leaned down, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, then let's give them something to remember. He kissed her again, and this time it wasn't brief or for show. This kiss was slow and deep, his hand tangling in her hair as she melted against him. Natalie forgot about Kyle, about Jessica, about everyone watching. All that existed was the warmth of Julian's mouth on hers and the way her entire body seemed to come alive under his touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said softly. 7 o'clock. I'll text you. You don't have my number. He pulled out his phone, showing her a contact entry with her name. You gave it to me behind the curtain. Don't you remember? She didn't, but that hardly mattered now. Tomorrow, she confirmed. Julian left shortly after, and Natalie made her own exit soon following. As she drove home through the quiet city streets, she touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. She'd come to the gallery to prove she'd moved on from Kyle. Instead, she'd found something entirely unexpected, the possibility of moving forward towards something new. Tomorrow turned into next week, which turned into 3 weeks of the most intense, exhilarating courtship Natalie had ever experienced. Julian wasn't just attentive, he was present in a way Kyle had never been, genuinely interested in her thoughts, her dreams, her daily struggles with lesson planning and budget constraints. Their first official date had been at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a neighborhood Natalie didn't know existed. No pretense, no performance, just two people talking until the restaurant staff gently informed them they'd been closed for an hour. Tell me about your business project, Natalie had asked over tiramisu they were sharing. Julian had been vague. Sustainable housing development. I work with a team that designs eco-friendly residential communities. It's complicated and honestly pretty boring. I doubt anything you do is boring. He'd smiled at that, reaching across the table to take her hand. What about you? What's the dream beyond the after-school program? And Natalie had found herself sharing her real dream, the one she barely admitted to herself. An art therapy center for underprivileged children, a place where kids could heal through creativity, where trained therapists could help them process trauma through paint and clay and expression. It's impossible, of course, she'd said, embarrassed by her own ambition. The funding alone would be astronomical, and I don't. And you interpreted that as surface of the sun? I may have gotten distracted. His arms came around her waist from behind, pulling her against his chest. There's this very distracting woman in my apartment. Natalie leaned back into him, feeling safe and desired in equal measure. Maybe we should order takeout. Probably wise. But Julian didn't let go, instead pressing a kiss to her neck that made her shiver. Or we could skip dinner entirely. She turned in his arms, finding his eyes dark with intention. That's a terrible idea. We haven't eaten since lunch. I can think of better ways to work up an appetite. His mouth found hers, and Natalie forgot all about food. They made it to the bedroom this time, unlike their previous encounter on his couch that had left them laughing and slightly bruised from awkward furniture angles. Julian was patient and thorough, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. You're beautiful, he murmured against her skin, and Natalie believed him because the way he looked at her made her feel like art, something precious and worthy of attention. Afterward, tangled in his sheets with the city lights casting patterns across the ceiling, Julian traced lazy circles on her shoulder. I have to tell you something, he said quietly. Natalie's stomach tightened with instinctive dread. That sounds serious. My project here is finishing ahead of schedule. I'll be heading back to Seattle next week. The words hit harder than they should have. 3 weeks wasn't long enough to get this attached, but somehow she had anyway. Oh, she managed. That's good. Ahead of schedule is good. Julian propped himself up on his elbow, looking down at her. Come with me. What? To Seattle. Not permanently, I know you have your students, your program. But for a long weekend. Let me show you my city, introduce you to my life there. He tucked her hair behind her ear. I don't want this to end just because geography gets complicated. Natalie's mind raced. Julian, we barely know each other. 3 weeks isn't. 3 weeks can be enough when you know. He kissed her softly. I'm not asking you to uproot your life. I'm asking for a weekend. For days to see if what we have is worth the effort of long distance. She wanted to say yes. wanted to be brave and impulsive and believe in possibilities. But fear held her back, fear of getting hurt again, of investing in something that couldn't last. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course." Julian settled back down, pulling her against his chest. "Just know that whether you come to Seattle or not, I'm not done with you, Natalie Brooks. Distance is just logistics. What we have is worth figuring out." They ordered Thai food eventually, eating it in bed while Julian told her about Seattle's art scene and Natalie shared stories about her most challenging students. The conversation flowed as easily as it always did, moving from deep to playful and back again. "What do you love most about what you do?" Natalie asked, stealing a spring roll from his container. Julian considered the question. "Creating spaces where people can build lives. Sustainable housing isn't just about being environmentally responsible, it's about giving families affordable, beautiful homes in communities that support them." His passion was evident in every word. "I grew up with privilege, with every advantage. Using that to help people who didn't have those advantages feels like the least I can do." "That's not boring at all," Natalie said softly. "That's beautiful," says the woman who dedicates her life to healing kids through art. He kissed her forehead. "We're quite a pair of idealists. Dangerous combination. The best kind of dangerous." Over the next few days, Natalie wrestled with the Seattle decision. Part of her wanted to dive in head first, to trust this connection and see where it led. But another part, the part still bruised from Kyle's betrayal, whispered warnings about getting attached too quickly. She confided in her best friend Maria over coffee on Saturday morning. "So let me get this straight," Maria said, stirring her latte. "This mystery man who rescued you from hiding behind a curtain, charmed your entire social circle, and apparently rocks your world in bed, wants to fly you to Seattle for a romantic weekend, and you're hesitating why exactly?" "Because I barely know him," Natalie protested. "He's vague about his work, I've never met his friends or family, and in 3 weeks he's managed to become incredibly important to me." "That's terrifying. That's called falling in love, honey." "I'm not in love. I'm in, heavy like." Maria raised an eyebrow. "You're using your lying to yourself voice." "I don't have a," Natalie stopped, sighing. "Okay, maybe I'm falling for him. Which is why going to Seattle is such a bad idea. What if I go and realize he's not who I think he is? Or worse, what if he is, and then long distance tears us apart anyway?" Or, Maria countered, what if you go and it's amazing, and you figure out a way to make it work because he's worth it? She reached across the table, taking Natalie's hand. "Kyle made you afraid to trust your own judgment. But your judgment about Julian has been right so far. Trust yourself." That evening, Natalie showed up at Julian's apartment unannounced. He opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair adorably messy. "Hey, I was just about to call you." "I'll go to Seattle," she interrupted. 4 days. "I want to see your life there." Julian's face broke into a brilliant smile. He pulled her inside, kissing her thoroughly. "You won't regret this." "I better not," she said against his lips. "I'm using 2 precious personal days for this trip. I'll make them count." His hand slid under her jacket, pulling her closer. "Starting with tonight." They didn't make it past the entryway, and Natalie decided that spontaneity had its advantages after all.